Last week's I recorded the intro afterwards because we just started chatting shit, so I'm still not quite sure what I'm gonna do. Yeah.
Oh, just wing it, mate. Sod it. Let's go for that. Like Kirsty said, we have interesting conversations all the time. I'm sure we'll be able to fill someone's head with intrigue and whatnot.
Then hell yeah, let's jump straight into it then. I think I'm still gonna do my opener because I like doing it. I like fucking around with my hands. So yeah. How you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 135 of the Simpa Life Podcast. Hope you're keeping well. We are well into February now, getting ever closer. I know I mentioned it the other day, but Cannabis is coming up, and I've just confirmed my press passes, so I'm feeling quite smug, quite happy to be able to skip the queue as me and Uncle Kush were talking about a couple of weeks ago. I also just wanted to quickly draw your attention to something that we discussed with Martin Condon, and that is that the Irish Assembly has met, and they've basically kicked the ball down the road for another 9 months, and they're not going to do jack shit about it. I'll include a link below to an article so you can read more into the details, because I don't want to linger on this. I want to jump straight into today's guest and the conversations that we're going to have. Today's guest is, I guess, Is your fourth time? You're joining the four-timer club?
I think it is.
Is indeed. We're going to have to get these special jackets printed up SNL style, I'm telling you. Today's guest is the founder of the UK-based cannabis consultancy agency, Hemp Hound, the host of Hemp Hound TV, GW's worst nightmare, and our unofficial CBD novel food specialist correspondent here at the TSL. TSL, that sounds weird when I say it like the Simpa Life Podcast. They are Cefyn Jones. How are you doing, brother?
Well, good, Simpa. It's great to be back. I just want to backtrack. You're saying like you're queue jumping at Spanabis. You know what happened last time someone got queue jumped or was caught queue jumping, don't you?
No.
The craziness with Phil and Holly.
Oh, the fucking royal family thing. I'm trying to relate this to weed going, what? I'm not quite on that level of celebrity. I don't think that people are going to be bothered by me.
Not with that attitude, certainly not. It's great to be here. I think it is. What was it? 3 times solo and 1 time with Carl Esplin.
Indeed. Yeah, we had the CBD special. I can't remember what number that was. I've written 80, 90, and 116. So one of them was the CBD special, and 2 of them were, solo appearances. As we were saying sort of in the preamble, we always have wicked conversations. So, we're going to jump straight into this. I'll include, obviously, links to previous episodes below, folks, so you can catch up with, especially mainly the first episode. That's where you'll get more an in-depth background of Cefyn's experience and kind of what brings him here today. But for sort of new and maybe lazy audience members and listeners, they don't have the time to jump back to that. That was very presumptive of me. Could you give us a bit of a brief background on, what brings you here today? What do you do in the space, brother?
Well, I'm primarily a signposting and advisory service within the hemp and CBD world, but I do cover other places, and I also do cover a level of investigative journalism, which also includes industry commentary. And you're saying, like, I'm GW's worst nightmare. That's a bit harsh. But I do like to kind of comment on the movement in the regulatory spaces, as well as, occasionally delving my nose into what's happening into the criminal world and anything, basically. Not as narrow, really, anymore as I used to be with hemp and CBD. But then, there's always opinions to share on how cannabis is evolving in the UK. And I think that's kind of edged towards allowing the evolution of the Hemp Hound agency. What I've been doing recently, I've been chasing conspiracy theories that really aren't conspiracy theories at all. They are all about the creation of GW Pharmaceuticals. And, you might think it's 1998. There's all suggestions to show that might be a little bit of a later date, shall we say, towards the intent that was GW in 1995. And basically from there, I've been piecing together a timeline that focuses on police movement, regulatory involvement, interesting samples from the Home Office to GW for testing. And certainly when we look at the political interests inside of the cannabis space, that as well, because let's be honest, we've all heard of people having potential conflicts, but we haven't seen any kind of investigations, shall we say, that would be demanded should, say, for example, the ministerial code of conduct be taken seriously. That'd be a nice day. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's pretty much me.
Excellent, very concise, and yeah, definitely there would be no MPs left if they actually followed their own policies and guidelines, because I think entirely the House is institutionally corrupt now at this point. Yeah, I referenced and deliberately obviously put it in the bio of GW's worst nightmare, in that you are one of, in fact, the only person that I can think of, especially at the level of consistency and continuity that you are, trying to dig up and understand the, like you said, the formation, the order in which these events occurred, who was involved, and how it led to today. Because we've all kind of known for quite a while now, especially when it came out under sort of Theresa May and Victoria Aikens and the kind of conflicts of interest there, that people started to understand that, wait, it's not unfeasible or insane to say there is an ongoing conspiracy with members of our civil service, with the Home Office, certain government, lords, I suppose, at this point, to control this narrative. And for decades, they've stood at that pulpit and they've said to us, skunk this, skunk that, no intentions of, changing the law around X, Y, Z. While it seems that through work that yourself is now uncovering, that they were involved in the creation of what is now becoming this sort of modern trade here in the UK of, prescription cannabis, air quotes, for my listeners at home.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair way of looking at it. I will say, though, a lot of my research has come from listening to people who already know snippets. You know, if you hear something once, okay. If you hear it twice, that's interesting. And if you hear it a third time, then definitely there's something worth having a little look. And the fact is, the whole, shall I say, cannabis community are aware of something. Someone might know 10% of this and 15% of that. And I think, interestingly, collectively, we've all kind of got the pieces there. There's definitely some agreement there. That agreement definitely benefits GW Pharmaceuticals. They have definitely been at the hand of developing policy, and that policy has been allowed by politicians who no doubt have questions to ask. I'll say no doubt questions to ask, because let's be honest, if Theresa May or Victoria Aikens or any of the others that I have kind of indicated in this equation have not got any, kind of conflicts as defined by law, then fair enough. But the fact is that they were mentioned in press, they were vilified in press, and in fact, I believe both were called hypocrites by the press, but then there was no investigation. So how are we supposed to know? Now, I have done a bit of digging, and there's definitely more than these little bits for both of them. But for some reason, I think there's a real actual interest for the public and the cannabis community as a whole to say, you may or may not have issues, but actually it's indicated that you do have conflicts. So come on, let's see what shares you've got. Come on, let's see the influence you've had on policy that, on an outside kind of view, has given GW the monopoly over the plan.
100%, man, 100%. I mean, the Aikens thing was disgusting, that she just publicly recused herself from involvement at a key time of policy. She should have been immediately removed from that, and somebody of independent, we can use some words there that just don't apply to politicians. I was going to say somebody of integrity, somebody independent, somebody of morals that could step in that position and look at it unbiased. But as we were alluding to, for effectively what's now coming up to 30 years potentially, the institutions that have been tasked with looking at this, I mean, I'm going to say this, I'm not saying that you've said this or uncovered this, but I personally feel, to put my little tinfoil hat on, that the ACMD is captured by a similar sort of mechanism, that for all they have said certain things and put forward certain other things, that because of regulators ending up in different positions and the movement of certain people, it seems that over this 30-year period, a consensus, as you say, was formed And a conspiracy doesn't require necessarily a plan and a regimented hierarchy and structure. It just requires a convergence of interest. And it seems that since this little bubble, as you say, in the early mid 90s, individuals moved into all sorts of positions. And for 30 years, this narrative seems to have fallen the same, almost as if scripted. Do you know what I mean? As you say this, oh, we're not looking at skunk, skunk causes psychosis and is dangerous and addictive and da 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 da. It is almost verbatim out of every mouth.
Yeah. Why are we the only country with the skunk narrative? Right. That's one question to ask, because I'd love to see what would happen if the Americans were kind of told, yeah, skunk bad, plus 14% THC.
It's interesting that you bring this up. Have you been keeping up with Florida?
Oh, no.
So Florida are trying to vote down smokables for recreation to be 10%, to cap concentrates at 60%. I've been keeping an eye on this for a while. There was a movement in Colorado about 5-6 years ago to do the same. Washington has been one of the states that they are trying heaviest to do so. And it just seems there is this floating lobby that is trying to get this. And again, with my tinfoil hat still on, I have, articulated on this podcast many times before my worry and my belief that the medical cannabis industrial complex is trying to restrain but also use the recreational market. They want that as an entry point. They want you to just walk into a shop freely, be able to buy a little joint of 10%, whatever, and go, that helped a little, actually. Yeah, I'll go talk to my doctor. And then the doctor gives you access to that next level, that Schedule 3 shit they're wanting to bring in the States. And it's about creating that division. As I've always said about GW, I believe they've allowed in some form cannabis to proliferate in the UK, and there may be kind of soft touches and whatever else. For information, like you alluded to before, about there's several policing institutions that are now caught up in this through paperwork that you can show factually were. Well, I'll let you sort of discuss this, but the samples with the police and the Home Office.
Yes, the samples from 2004 to 2018. There are 3 traceable events where where GW were given samples from the Home Office. Now, I don't know how many batches there were, only that there was 500 samples per batch. And I also know that when they were first recorded between 2004 and 2005, their intent, or their outward intent, was to test for CBD content in street weed. Now, I find that quite interesting because around 2004 is also the time where GW start taking CBD seriously. Certainly, if you have a little look at Redding's timeline, 10-year timeline of their Reading University, that is, of their relationship with GW, and their relationship revolved around CBD R&D. You can see that, basically, slightly distracted. There's a lot of things going on. So they didn't take the samples themselves. That was a Dr. Potter. And he was tied to University College London. So, yeah, why would they be exploring CBD in that context? There's also another aspect that suggests that not only were they doing that, they were creating a database of strains and their medicinal potential. Now, I find it quite interesting because recently we've had Victoria Aikens named as the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Mm-hmm. Now, on the very day that happened, I noticed that the Home Office's opinion on the Home Affairs Committee's review on recreational drug use had come out. And considering the title of that document, I find it strange that in there it said that NICE had been instructing clinicians to stop prescribing unlicensed cannabis for medicinal uses versus chronic pain because R&D funding had been made available for CBD versus chronic pain. And that's a bit bizarre, isn't it? But I am slightly getting ahead of myself on these samples. Like, there's something that really kind of plays on my head, right? and that's 148 patents from GW, right? Now, we're talking samples from seizures and arrests, right? They're not going to all be recreational smokers. There are going to be those who are actually taking it for medicinal relief.
Well, how are they defining that when they're capturing the sample, though? Sorry to
I don't know, but the thing that gets me there is that I'd find that there's a high probability that someone in the UK could find out that their sample that they were arrested for medicinal use was used to stabilize a patent application for a cannabinoid compound and mixture that is effective towards that condition. And what will happen, as I believe that's been seen with Victoria Akins, is that basically as soon as enough evidence has been seen to show a strain is effective against condition this, that, and the other, right, there's going to become R&D funding available for it. And of course, if you want that R&D funding, you need to be in select crowds, certain licenses and the likes of. And we're talking, extreme and hardcore knowledge in cannabinoid-based preparations. That's kind of leaving the door open for one company, I think. Sorry, I thought I saw my tinfoil hat on for a second.
Yeah, I mean, if we were sat here 5 years ago, 10 years ago having this conversation, it would be a hell of a lot more conspiratorial. But there is, I don't believe there is any such thing as a coincidence. I think everything is just yet to be understood, the links and the connections between. And I think when you can zoom out on a long enough sort of timeline, a picture on this, zoom out to get a longer picture and a timeline on this, as you say, it's every event correlates in such a way that the fifth event can't have happened without the fourth, the third, the second, the first. It's these are not just random events linked; they are entirely succinct and linear, and they require the previous interaction, and therefore, that to me speaks of design, intention. And like I said before, I don't think you're going to find like a smoking gun of a document that says, GW's plan to take over the world. But the kind of individuals involved, the ones that you were alluding to sort of before, they're so institutionally inculcated by this. It is within every sinew and fiber of their being to dominate industry, air quotes, to, be captains of industry and the good capitalists. So fucking people over and allowing people to die for billions in profit is just a normal daily thing. So it's not as if there's like a malice to it. It's just capitalists capitalizing under a system. And then they've got, again, maybe this is something you speak to, there seems to be then this kind of government protection. I don't mean the government as in the people that come and go every 4 or 5 years. I mean the institutions that run this. There seems to be these long-held connections between certain sectors. Can you speak toward that?
I'll tell you what, going back to event and reaction. 2016, when I first really kind of stepped into the CBD world, I'd only been in it 5 minutes, and the MHRA jumped out and tried to redefine CBD as a purely medicinal compound. And I remember the Yanks, the public backlash, the creation of the CTA at the time, and from there, I can kind of explain where something's happened and what's around it. But that one there, right, I kind of had a new revelation recently about it. Now, first of all, right, you've got the creation of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy by Theresa May in July 2016. Right, that was literally weeks after she became Prime Minister. Now, what's also interesting is that is the same month that Epidiolex completed phase 3 trials. Right. BEIS themselves were in part tasked with managing the UK's progression towards becoming more of a powerhouse for medicinal CBD and cannabinoid-based products. That can be shown by the fact that they were awarded the right and direction to implement what's known as the Tiger Report, which basically states that intention. So we've got the creation of a department that ultimately would control that dynamic by a woman who, as Home Secretary, has quite a few interesting events tied to her and the direction of the government with cannabis that ultimately affects GW in a positive way, of course. And then you got the approval of Epidiolex, right? Now, I think it's quite lucky that there was enough public backlash to kind of push that back. But beyond there, you can kind of see how other events unfold in similar ways. Like, you know, all you have to do is look at the event, have a look 5 minutes before, see what regulatory movement or approvals has occurred, and then most likely you've got an explanation as to what is truly going on there. And you know, the good thing is no tinfoil hat required.
Yeah.
But yeah, institutionalized that BEIS. I find it interesting. Then that they've basically taken over a management role that I believe Theresa May had. But who had it before Theresa May? It wasn't a Tory. In fact, by all accounts, it was Gordon Brown. He was, in fact, the one who ordered Jackie Smith to reclassify cannabis against ACMD advice. But what was interesting in that is that inside of the documents, you've got a Dr. David Potter, who provided the information from the samples we were just talking about that showed that CBD levels in street weed had gone right down. And that was used as justification to reclassify cannabis from a Class C to Class B. So there is a kind of big institution really kind of in this that transcends political landscapes. You know, you've got the creation of any agreement. I mean, I say it's a public-private partnership, but, you know, any agreement, regardless of what it's defined as, it was created in 1998 when the Home Office accepted Dr. Jeffrey Guy's 22-point plan to regulate and control cannabis. Now, from that point, who was the political manager? Well, I've got a couple of ideas, but maybe I won't kind of drop that information from here. But what we do know is certainly from 2004, there was those samples being given to GW, right? Now, who authorized them? You know, it would be whoever was the Home Sec at the time. But certainly, it was Gordon Brown who turned around, and I can't find any reason for him yet. There's some more digging that I've got to do. But he is technically the first visible manager of this agreement simply on the basis of him ordering his Home Secretary to do something technically outside of his remit, even though he's employed her to have control over over drugs. It's like me hiring you to play bagpipes for me, but then me literally kind of playing bagpipes for you and saying, this is how it's done, get to it and don't deviate. And a bit of a naff analogy. I could have done better, but
I think the point comes across. I think there's an extra dynamic to sort of add into that is kind of the cultural element. Obviously, I suppose technically, let's call it wave 1.5 to wave 2.0 of the coffee shops and the kind of the early iterations before the clubs became called clubs, this kind of social space coffee shop model that, again, majority were worked out with the help of Noel van Schaik, rest in peace, from Willie's Whartle in... I can't remember which city it is. It's not Amsterdam. It's just outside of, but it escapes me right now. But basically, he did some training programs with people like Colin Davies and several others, and they opened up, you know, the Dutch experience and different. I'm trying to think what Chris Baldwin's club was called. Coffee shops were called. But yeah, there was like Winston Smith and that. They were all involved in it. And there's this groundswell. And this was before the separation of medical and recreational use. And some people just consumed fucking cannabis. And in the models of the coffee shops, you bought the so-called recreational products at a higher rate to discount the medical access. And it was generally down in optics. You know, if somebody rolled in a fucking wheelchair, you weren't charged a higher rate or whatever. And then if you could have a discussion, they'd kind of understand and they'd help with supply or whatever. And so the rating of all of that was very public, and there were movements and campaigns that kind of grew out of this. And I agree. Yeah, it's odd that Gordon Brown sort of had that kind of conversation, but there were conversations being had under his predecessor, under Blair, and obviously majority of the cabinet stayed about the same. Majority of the institutions stayed about the same between the two. Obviously, that was the Blair Brown deal, which kind of got fucked up because of the Iraq War. Without going too much into esoteric Labour politics. Yes, it shows then that it's cross-party.
Let's look beyond before that point, because we know that the grow license to GW wasn't awarded until just after the Labour had got their foot through the door, right? There had to be a level of negotiation before that. In fact, the story of how GW became GW is actually a bit murky, because some people would think that his words in a document called The Medicalization of Cannabis. Any chance you can link that in the comment section below?
Yes, I can. If you send it to us afterwards, definitely. Yeah.
Page 34 through to 39. It explains exactly how Dr. Guy ended up talking to the Home Office, getting his license and whatnot. But he interestingly states that he had a company before that called Ethical Pharmaceuticals. Now, they approached the Home Office and said, let's talk about cannabinoids, right? But the Home Office is supposed to have said no, right? That's what he said. So he went off, and then there was a series of events in 1997 that led to further conversations and him effectively being in the position that he is now, a lot richer. But interestingly, the company that would become GW Pharmaceuticals in 1998 was created in 1995 by a chartered accountant called Brian Thompson. Not quite certain who he is, other than that, but he resigned from his position 1 month before GW became GW. Right? More specifically, 1 month before it was announced that GW had received their license to grow from the Home Office. Now, if it was just a case of him walking around in 1997 and things, chain reaction as a result of a chance meeting occurred, you wouldn't see the intent for GW in 1995 in Companies House. Titanite Limited was set up for a reason. Now, was it to ultimately become GW Pharmaceuticals? I mean, did someone set up Titanite thinking that they were going to open up a corner shop and then just go, oh, hold on, no, we got something here. Let's change the dynamic. There's something not right in the story there at all.
Yeah, there is some elements missing, and for legal sake, continuity's sake, etc. This is speculation from this point, purely for this part of the conversation on my part.
Arts. I mean, I can fill in some blanks. I tell you what I find interesting is at the point of sale between Jazz of GW to Jazz Pharmaceuticals, one person is named as a major shareholder, and his name is Lord William Waldegrave. Now, interestingly, he does more work than just 4 years as a director, or 3 years as a director, and yet somehow he walks away with 193,000 shares, just over, which, considering they were $200 a share plus $20 of Jazz shares per share, right, it worked out at just shy of $40 million US. And I find it interesting that he's dotted across the journey. And there's other people who are associated that are dotted across that journey. There, whilst there's an institution behind, and you can kind of say, right, okay, they're the political manager, or if you want to know the private company manager, Deloitte. They have a long history with GW Pharmaceuticals that can be traced 20 years in total, as 18 years as GW's auditor, 1 year being named in the documents of sale of GW to Jazz, and then basically they won a contract to review novel food regulations, which is basically restricting the CBD industry, which is a natural competitor of sorts to the dominance of Epidiolex. But that's the main thing. There has been someone all the way through. We can look at Gordon Brown and his event and say, right, okay, but then he disappeared from politics. So what was that? And Theresa May, well, she was there for 6 years as Home Secretary. There are certain events of question. She then became Prime Minister and basically signed in the legalization of medicinal cannabis in 2018. But then from 2020, what's going on? Who's got it from there? There has to be someone central behind that is controlling, that is puppeteering.
100%. I mean, I think you may struggle with the 2020 thing. Obviously, for obvious certain events that were going down, and I think most people that were connected to healthcare and business and that quasi, crossover on the Venn diagrams, they were busy making fucking money. They weren't waiting for this, 10 years, lads, we'll check out, we'll get shares. They were like, I've just set up a company. Dave, come on, you set up a company, you set up a company. They were robbing us fucking blind. So I think that project was probably put on pause for a little bit, or not unintentionally, backburnered, obviously ticked over in the various ways that these things are. But I think, it now presents a case of, like you say, that this has to be investigated, and every individual that has held the offices from day dot need to be looked at. They need to be checked for their conflicts of interest. They need to be understood what relationships they have had. Because as we said, Jackie Smith's now going to be a fucking non-executive advisor for Dalgety. It was Dalgety was the fucking name of the company. I could remember the other day, guys, when I embarrassed myself, saying several words beginning with D. Anyway, so she's then rewarded for that, nearly 20 fucking years after the fact? Not 20 years, I can't do the math on that. 15 years, we'll call it, after the fact. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So these people they've got long things, so that you're not going to notice that necessarily, that link. But again, with a zoomed out lens, it has to be interwoven. It has to be a tapestry of corruption and cronyism and just motherfuckers just tweaking at every part of it to massage this reality into existence.
Well, here's a question based on that, all right? If you've got a panel of experts, right, at your beck and call, and you tell them that you want an honest opinion on something, right, and that opinion is supposed to be observed, right? Why would you ask them to come to a conclusion on cannabis to then kind of just say, right, okay, we're just making it a Class B against the advice? That to me doesn't make sense. I mean, obviously there must be the requirement for some level of process. But they were turning around at the time and saying there's a real public concern with strong cannabis, specifically skunk. I mean, don't get me wrong, the poll that they conducted to determine that, I believe, only asked 1,004 people. But did they have to even do that? I'm sure under certain circumstances they could just go do. I mean, Theresa May did it as well, didn't she, with CAT? Wasn't that 2004, where she basically reclassified it against scientific and cultural advice. What does she get out of that? And let's be honest, considering what we know, are we going to see her with some kind of directorship to a medicinal cannabis company that also has an angle in exploiting the active ingredients from cat in some formats?
Dude, 100% already. All of them are in everything.
No, again, she's too smart, mate.
People look around, right? So again, her husband Philip is business and fucking relations manager. In a company where it's like sales, selling cars. The more cars you fucking sell, you're gonna get your bigger fucking bonus, sort of thing. And they're not, for all capitalism runs quarter to quarter, profits year to year, etc. These guys are on a much larger scale. We are witnessing the rediscovery and remedicalization of all narcotic drugs. So when you go back and you look at our history, and you go prior to the Harrison Act, prior to the first attempts at dealing with fucking opium, if you were a rich posh person, you know, open seers and go, oh, darling, do you want a nice some heroin? We'll order some heroin. And you get your nice presentation case with your vials and your needles. And it comes with a little fold out of how you can take it at home. You know, you can just order your cocaine. You can go down to the pharmacy, give it all. Drugs were just drugs, and there was an accepted kind of use for them, but then all of a sudden, this all goes back, without jumping around too fucking much here, to the coincidental creation by two individuals, a Scotsman and a fucking Frenchman, of the hypodermic needle. So various people have created the components, the plunger, the whatever, and these two individuals, within about 6 months of each other, went, oh, we can do this, and we can make drugs into salts, and then we can break the salts down into liquids, and then and it just changed the game altogether. And this is one of the reasons cannabis fell out of favor, was that it wouldn't go into a fucking needle. It doesn't break down in the same way for standardization of dose like 90% of the other drugs do. So they came far more into favor. And again, it feels like when you look at it and you go, but prohibition and all of this, yeah, but then it was sold and all of this. It feels like what I was saying before, that the agencies and companies are like, we know these things are going to do this, but rather than spend money on R&D and doing it in-house and hiding it, let it out to the public and we get the best of both worlds. These drugs are wonderful. Look, they do help, but look how dangerous they are. That proves that we need to control them.
When was the hypodermic event, roughly? What decade?
1848, I want to say.
All right, 1848.
But actually, so we end, because if an interesting one to follow, if you want to look at what's happening with modern psychedelics now, and I've got Dennis Walker coming on in a couple of weeks. He's an interesting dude. I can't pronounce his name, mycotrepreneur, which is like myco mushrooms and entrepreneur, and he does basically like skits and stuff online. He's a public speaker and stuff, and he takes the piss out of like the gentrification and the classist movements that we're seeing, the co-option of psychedelics and drugs.
Sprockets! We're having a live interview, mate. What's that all about?
Dog grumbling?
I did the director for security and treats and his underling, our brand new pug is. Oh no! Now she's going to start howling. This is hilarious.
We getting away with it?
Shush.
Typical.
Oh come on! Shush, 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 shush. Good girl. Good girl. Okay. Yeah. So my apologies.
No worries. No worries. Trying to think where I was there.
No, shush.
What was chatting? So we're talking about hypodermic needle.
Yeah, that was it. When they came about, I was going to say, because I recognised that there was a pharmaceutical breakthrough of sorts around that town. In fact, 1848. I think that's very close to the formulation of the world's first recognised pharmaceutical company in the guise of a big pharma company. That's Merck, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. It comes again because prior to that, it all comes down to sort of pattern and preparation. So you used to have your alchemists, and you'd go and they would have apothecaries and that sort of thing, and not alchemists, sorry, and they'd have these giant shelves of stuff, and you'd come and they'd make you a potion effectively. That's what it was kind of closer to than it is to the modern era. Think the druggist in It's a Wonderful Life, for anybody that happens to enjoy that movie every year as I do. And you just kind of break down your stuff, and you've got things, and you make your preps, and you send them out to the patients. And with the hypodermic needle, it came from complications of things like laudanum. And so obviously we, the Brits, have a massive role to play in the globalization of drugs trade. We started quite benign with sugar and tea, and I say benign not for the Haitians or the fucking Indians, the Chinese later on with opium, etc. But yeah, so we then kickstarted this kind of desire for these sorts of things. And then over time, it became this pious kind of European Christian Catholic, we need to justify this. I enjoy this, yes, but it helps with this. So therefore it's medicine. And then the more that lie and thing of going, yeah, I'm medicine and I'm a good person, you're abusing it and you're bad and evil. You're sent by the devil. You don't believe in my God, so your drug use is bad. And kind of separated over time. That's my personal belief here. And then when we end up with a hypodermic needle, it changed the fucking game because it became about very specific doses. For all the still things that have to be taken into consideration, this is why anesthetists are paid so fucking much to understand like body weight, composition, fucking diet, other illnesses, etc. So they don't fucking kill you, but keep you under long enough that you don't, wake up under. And so yeah, they kind of co-opted and took these drugs into this and went, no, this is medicine. And so the racket, effectively, the doctors became like the new gods. They were literally, the physician supremacy, as I describe it as. And they kind of then rally against these apothecaries and these kind of old world kind of herbalists and the people using these other things going, well, that's pseudoscience. Look at our stuff that's all bleached and chemical white and it's clean and crisp. And look at these machines and this. It was all about the modern industry and the painting of it and the separation when 90% of what they had was made from their stuff. They were just using new extractions, new formulations. And in that, they could then patent them. Because every fucker could just get cannabis sativa or Indian hemp back in the day or whatever they were describing it as on the bottle. It was then about the preparations you could make from it, how you could mix it up that would then become a product per se, but they weren't patentable under the old mechanism because they were loosely regulated for the longest period of time until, like I said, the Harrison Act. And then when that kind of came along, that was like, no, these things are either medicine or they're fucking not available. And it created that kind of cartel. And as you say, the institutional power of that, I mean, if you look at a lot of the chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies are highly interrelated, especially, I mean, it gets a bit contentious, like in the early formations of Germany, a lot of the pharmaceutical developments were created in that sort of region, Switzerland as well, and that sort of thing, where like companies like Sandoz and whatever. But yeah, as you say, like Merck and or what became Merck and a lot of them still existing pharmaceutical companies today, the large ones that we know, came from the roots of this. And it was just capitalist competition. So it was about creating better and stronger fucking drugs. And a lot of people fucking died. I mean, there's a whole narrative, I might link it below if I remember, about the Spanish flu and how quite a chunk of the proportion of people died was from acetaminophen poison, from paracetamol, from aspirin. Because they were giving them like 300 times more than they were able, and they were overdosing people at the point of care for the first few months because they didn't understand any of this shit. Whereas now paracetamol is so benign to us in a way. Obviously, you get restricted buying 2 boxes, but you just buy, and for people that use it, I've never used it, but you take 2 and you forget about it. But then back in the day, like I said, so in some way, to give them their due, the standardization and the process of it has helped in terms of consistency, but in terms of transparency and honesty, we've had that breakdown. Whereas back in the day, you went to your druggist, the drugstore, you think of the old meme sort of picture, that guy knew his drugs. That guy knew his drugs. Do you know what I'm saying?
Isn't the word drug or drugstore some kind of Dutch kind of throwback that involves weed and or hemp or cannabis, whatever it was called back then? I'm sure there is. But you say the Harrison Acts there. For us in the UK, that was actually the 1941 Pharmacies and Medicines Act. Interestingly, CBD was isolated in 1940, which I kind of find myself wondering if that's coincidental. Before that, of course, in 1898, I believe, was when CBN was first isolated. But with the 41 pharmacies and
heroin was released by Bayer. Was 1898.
Who thought that there was better for you than aspirin at the time?
Well, they actually, and I've been trying to find this, and again, I'm asking you fine folk out there in the ether. I'm looking for the original Sears, I think it's a Sears catalog double page, which shows the heroin needle and the hypodermic pack that you can buy. But on the other side is this advert basically talking about giving heroin to kids for coughs. I know it exists. I've seen it written formation that's documented in an archive somewhere, but they don't have the picture of the thing. But there was whole campaigns of literally like heroin for fucking kids, and they're doing cocaine as well. Was being not even prescribed to kids, was just being over the counter medication to children.
Mind you, I mean, it's a sign of the times, isn't it? Because cigarettes were sold to kids for asthma back then. You know, it's interesting, but
Sorry,
Back
we've
to
moved on a bit.
that Pharmacies and Medicines Act, worth checking out. Certainly, if someone is, shall we say, a closet politics geek, and they want to go on to Hansard or they work for you or whatnot, the debate for that. Interestingly, there's a guy called Lord Plummer, I believe is the MP for Brighton, and he was actually the chair of the Herbalist Society at the time. And he questioned why there was parliamentary time, I believe, at midnight to discuss this at the height of war, where parliamentary time could be more wisely used. He's actually on record, even though it was from that long ago, about saying that. I don't. You have to double check because I haven't seen it for a bit. Certainly, Lord Plummer brings to mind. But there's an interesting bit of poetry that comes from that. A weird story. Basically, I was coming across this at the time, and I mentioned it to my wife, Kirsty, and she was like, hold on a second. And she ended up coming out with this Culpeper annual from that very year, right? Can't find it online, but she apparently found it from a family relative some time back, and didn't know why she grabbed it, but she did. Seemed almost like it was, destined that I should see it. But I'll share that poetry with you as well. It's the Chemists and the BMA. It's called, and it's basically the herbalists' woe at the government's move to basically do exactly as you said. Demonize herbal properties and remedies, but then give it to pharmaceutical companies so that they can extract the active compounds and create products that are patentable from there. It is something that's been about for a long time. And does that all come from the hypodermic? I never thought of that before, because obviously that does just basically that small piece of thin metal can obviously have so much money thrown down it. It's insane.
That's what I've come to from everything that I've sort of looked at with this, is that prior to that, it was about volume. No one really fucking knew. Yeah, you had O'Shaughnessy and various other Scots and other sort of, at the time, I guess, British Empire kind of individuals going to India and China and whatever else and doing various research on different compounds. They would, in some ways, doing it in the crudest sense. They came to the realization, it's like, you look at O'Shaughnessy's work and it's like, yeah, we've now rediscovering that. We're having to reprove this shit, even though he did it just purely through observation and through communicating with consumers. It wasn't about kind of triple blind placebo control and any of that. And so they from that extrapolated then this usage, and then people through again experience, your druggist he would hand out enough of this that he would understand, oh yeah, when 25 of these people have this response, I give them this and this and whatever. Whereas now it's that tiny piece of paper and all contraindications and type it in the machine. Machine says you've got to have this one now. And they're so far removed from it. But the druggist guy would also be like asking how you're doing, what's your life? Do you know what I mean? There'd be kind of an intervention there, and there'd be other things that would be brought up, and you were living in a much healthier society in terms of active health, definitely physical health in terms of, obesity, etc., and the comorbidities that are caused therein. But yeah, it does just seem to me that there is this split, because the Herbalist Society, I think it's like 20, 30 years younger than like the NHS. So like the Herbalists were about, and I think there's a precursor site, because there's the Herbalist Society, and then I think there's like the Royal Herbalist ones, which are even older. I think they predate what we would consider to be the modern form of medicine practice. And that kind of came out of, again, I think Queen Victoria at the time. It was, like I said, loved her drugs, loved, and you have to say allegedly at this fucking point, there's more than enough documentation online for all it is quite suppressed. It was never designed this thing of taking away. And it was interesting, my guest last week, we were talking about the Ledane Commission in Canada. During the Ledane Commission from the 1970s. Yeah. So a Canadian politician and judge and a bunch of motherfuckers got together, and they basically went out and spoke to all these people across Canada in the early 70s, and they went, what's drugs, what's drug culture? And they came back and they basically went, it is, fundamentally, morally, ethically wrong to criminalize people for drug use. And that one of the foundational ideas of it was this idea of no justification, that you like drugs because you like drugs. That is enough. You don't have to justify when you go, I ate pizza tonight. Oh, why? Why do you eat pizza? Why didn't you eat hamburger? Do you know, what, are you supporting Germans over Italians or whatever, or whatever bullshit? Do you know what I mean? It's an arbitrary intervention that shouldn't exist at the state level. And it feels like all this started back when, again, it became this moralizing justification, because once drugs became normal, it wasn't just high society, drinking tea with their pinkies out and, ooh, look, Haitian sugar. Do you know what I mean? And going, oh, we have some Indian hemp, and, we've got some coca leaf and all these wonderful exotic things that the high society be sat around drugging themselves up with. Once capitalism ramps up and that gets out to the lower classes, there needs to be another level of separation. I don't want to do cocaine if everyone's doing cocaine. Do you know what I mean? It plays into it, and then they want to crack down on that lot, which means their behavior gets cracked down on, subsequently, and then it becomes, well, actually, no. I take heroin because, I got bad back, and then, oh, you're okay. And do you know what I mean? It creates that system. That's the foundation of this system, of the idea that, people can be taking 4 or 5 different fucking opioids and they're prescribed it, and we don't think of them as, smackheads. But they're more fucked up than the average heroin consumer that you see on the street. That worst painted image by society of a homeless individual that's really in suffering. They're more fucked up, but they're functioning. The reason they're functioning is because society doesn't look at them like they're a piece of shit. Well, you've got your piece of paper. You're a good citizen. I experience this with weed every fucking day when I'm out. Do you know what I mean? I'm smoking a joint, which means that's my schedule 1. As long as I get rid of that, schedule 2, I'm safe.
Yeah.
It's the hypocrisy of this fucking shit. There was some kid the other day for Sans something platform. It's launched in the UK.
All right.
SANA and then 3 other letters or whatever it is. It's not Sanskrit, but it's similar. There was some video they released of a guy vaping huge glass apparatuses and mods for vapes and openly just smoking, vaping his prescription cannabis, and shared the video as if this is activism. Yeah, I want to go and subtly, step outside and smoke my blunt and medicate in a way that will actually help me, because I'd go through fucking half a fucking ounce before a vape would touch the sides. Yet 3 of a fucking blunt and I'm sweet. I would be harassed. But that kid is like, no, I should have the right to have this giant bowl of glass and blow around where people are eating, and with no consideration, just a narcissistic entitlement.
Well, if we're going to look at that in its raw sense, shush, Coco, you've had your opinion already. I don't remember this being an issue on the last meeting. Shush. But, first off, if that's medicinal cannabis use, it should be through a vaporizer, shouldn't it? Not bong.
Well, no, sorry, it is a vaporizer.
Right.
They've got these huge glass mods and they're plugging their vapes into it and shit. And it's just to be like, look at me. And it's all attention seeking and content creation. And it's not sincere activism. They're not engaging people. They're not actually helping the cause. It's the same as these fucking vegans. I'm a 10-year plus vegan. Yeah, have you ever heard me fucking talk about fucking veganism and try and convert people? No, because that's not my prerogative. It's my life choice, not fucking yours. And if you want to do real activism, I'm angered by this. I didn't realize, sorry, how angry
you
I am by this.
You're triggering yourself.
I am, yeah, because it's wrong. It's then them saying that we're safe. Look, my piece of paper. I can act like a dickhead. But then somebody who doesn't have the protection of that piece of paper takes the decency to go step out of a venue, like I was talking about last week about me getting kicked out of Beans on Toast multiple times, walking round the corner, well out of the way, consuming a joint, and then going back to the venue and being caught up because of the fucking smell. Like, I'm still criminalized on that aspect of it. If I smoke this, which is the thing, like I said, that gives me benefit, it nullifies my protection from the piece of paper. Yet that individual, that again, I'm sorry if I called them a dick before. I was meant to say their behavior is a dick. I don't know them as an individual. I don't want to make that assessment. I don't know. But from what I've seen, from what they're promoted of it, it is just a stunt to go viral so that then there is more people in the prescription system. And I don't mind if that system continues to grow, but until it actually has combustion within it, it is a fucking lie. Because I've spoken to the heads of various clinics, various prescribing doctors, and they know. They've heard from people like me when I've told my doctors that I'm breaking the law, and they, under their fucking oath and all the other documents, are supposed to go, I can't prescribe you. Can't prescribe you. You told me you're breaking the law. They should do what, for all I fucking hate them, Sapphire and now Curaleaf did to me. when they had an interdisciplinary team meeting and they removed me from their service because of my flagrant misuse of their packaging and my open flouting of their rules. I would kind of respect them in a backhanded way for them actually adhering to the fucking rules. Whereas a lot of these other clinics in this other space, like, we don't fucking care. Chuck it out, chuck it out. As I've kind of spoken to on the podcast before, no offense to get Big Nasty or anybody like that, but bringing in cultural people and sticking them in a white coat in a fucking pharmaceutical environment and going, well, this is medicine now. You're muddying the waters and taking the fucking piss. Why is that medicine ahead of what I organically grow for myself? Do you know what I mean? Why can't I have that same access? I don't want to be the idiot with the giant thing and look at me. The reason, touch a lot of wood, I haven't been arrested for my consumption in 20 years of being 20 years of consuming and 10 years of being very loud and proud, is etiquette, basic decency, is knowing the environment, reading the fucking room, not being a dickhead or entitled so that when others smell it, it's just, okay, I haven't gone up and sat amongst kids or whatever. I'm on sliding down a kid's play park. Slide in a kid's play park or some shit. You know what I mean? You being a responsible consumer, an ambassador for the plant, and that kind of behavior is just reprehensible. It's abhorrent to me. It's the opposite of activism.
I can see that the vein in your temple is just going down now, sir. And breathe.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Do you know what? It's weird, isn't it? I remember the good old days where the only times where cannabis was glorified was technically in 90s hip hop tunes, where it was more kind of like, as part of a day-by-day function or adding a level of creativity to your rhymes. And now you see all these videos like, I don't really watch them anymore. You watch 2 or 3, it's like, oh, well done. Or if someone sticks a spaceman helmet on, and they've got a leaf blower. I mean, yeah, fair enough. But if it's a case of like, look at me, I'm doing this, and it's because I'm a medicinal user, it is sending the wrong messages. I think you should be true to why you use cannabis. I could use it for some medicinal content or reasons, but I don't. Me personally, I enjoy the plant, and I think it's something that gives a level of community, with when you're sharing a spliff, or it gives a level of creativity when you use it. I mean, is more creativity a medicinal claim? I don't know. Well, again, but here's the thing, right? You have those opinions because you've been forced into a box. Everyone's been forced into a box. There's just a lot of people have seen over the road that actually there's a different box to jump in, and it means that you get a piece of paper and you've got a vape and whatnot, and that's frustrating. But let's look at this properly, right? With that 2008 ACMD report that used data from GW, there was a poll of 1,004 people. Right? What kind of reflection does that give on society? Because they're the ones who say that there's a real public concern around strong cannabis and skunk. But hold on, that could have been 1,004 civil servants.
Well, exactly.
It could have been 1,004 people in a constituency that were basically completely anti, but it doesn't represent the whole screenshot. And what it doesn't represent in any way is that the public have had a chance to have a conversation about cannabis and, explain, like yourself, your frustrations. I personally would explain my frustrations, but now I feel my raison d'etre is to champion for a conversation on cannabis and not so much kind of put my thoughts either side of the equation. But that in itself is something that we all want, whether we're medicinal users, glorifying it through insane apparatus, you having your vein throbbing and saying justifiable things at the end of the day. We all need that conversation. And the reason why we haven't got that conversation is because of political decisions, right? And that should strike a tone, because Professor David Nutt was the person who first introduced me to that term, right? And he used that to describe Jackie Smith's decision to ignore ACMD guidance and suggesting that cannabis should have stayed as a Class C drug and then lifted up to a Class B drug? Was there any level of public consultation? I wouldn't call a 1,004 people poll any level of consultation, really. Certainly not in something like that. Now, if there was actively a kind of, we're going to look at this properly, we're going to allow the public opinion to formulate our direction forward. I mean, we might not get what we want. Someone will get what they want without a doubt, but we might not be those people. But equally, it still would have come from public dialogue. And I could live with that.
It's the only place that it can come from. As you say, it's the same with the fucking the toxicology reports submitted by GW and everything else. It's entirely cherry-picked, controlled data. It's the same with what we've seen with the FDA. You need 2 successful fucking things. You can have 200,000 where you murder 1 billion people, but as long as you show 2 things that are correct, you will get your fucking license and move through it. The whole thing's institutionally, fundamentally corrupted. I do want to
those lab reports have disappeared now.
Of course they will. Everything's going to fucking disappear before too long, and it's because people like yourself doing the work.
You got to check this. This is hilarious, right? I accidentally fell into a webinar that was hosted by the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry. Some people might know them as the ACI. They were created by the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, who are part of the campaign to legalize medicinal cannabis, and they've got a few ties to GW, the likes of. So yeah, basically I was on that, and there was a conversation about some applications using Epidiolex data in novel foods, right? But it was okay because the toxicology reports were coming back suggesting that 70 milligram ADI that the GW lab reports were suggesting, right? So I stuck my hand up because novel foods was announced in January 2019, announced properly in the EU, right? In February of that year, the World Health Organization released recommendations that suggested that people could take 2,400 milligrams of CBD a day with no ill effect, right? So I went into the chat and I said, how is it that tox reports are coming back suggesting an ADI in line with 16 GW lab reports when we had a variety of information provided by the World Health Organization that determined 2,400 milligrams a day was safe? Now, the head of Novel Foods, the current head of Novel Foods, Paul Tossell, messaged, and he said, that's because they were for pharmaceutical products and not food. But the 16 lab reports came from GW Pharmaceuticals and were not for a food. They were for Epidiolex. So recently, the FSA have accepted that they've got most of the information to process forward with novel foods. They have introduced a insanely low 10 milligram ADI. I mean, it was 70 milligram before, and before novel foods, it was 200 milligram, which was agreed with the MHRA and the CTA and the wider industry at the time. So we've gone right far down. But the Epidiolex lab reports have disappeared. The reason being, because they're for a pharmaceutical product and not a food. But we've had them hanging over novel foods.
The argument,
it's stupid. I mean, you know, why remove them now on what was blatantly the obvious?
Well, like I was saying before, of kind of the linear stops at this point, it's constructed in such a way that once you pass the next gate, it's like locks on a boat, rising a boat through on a canal. Some people might not understand that, but like you go in, you get locked, and it lifts the water up, and then you move through it, sort of thing. That is, in my head, the analogy that I've kind of gone for, of that ascension of this, and there is no going back. So they can with confidence change various other things. I can't. There's a documentary I saw not that long ago. I can't pull the name out of it, but there was basically they ran through this cycle of just putting in new executives, and the new executives are like, wasn't my tenure. I wasn't here. I don't know. We'll draw a line under that. And then somebody else would take the blame for a load of shit, and then they'd run off with their money, and then they draw a line, and they just kept moving through this model of corruption. And it's a similar sort of thing that, yeah, they pull in their martyrs, they have their various things, and I don't quite believe that everything is orchestrated, but I believe they have a hand in controlling what is allowed to be heard. So they'll be like, oh, this policy tank is da-da-da, and we don't hear about that. It's never really reported. And then there's one that they're like, oh, headline in the Daily Mail. And it's as soon as that's, I'm like, well, that's fake. Like I remember when allegedly the CMC tested a load of the CTA's fucking products and had a Daily Mail exclusive article about, dozens of products being toxic and mislabeled and the whole industry being a con. And when you look at
2018, that was when I just started working for the CTA. And I remember looking at that. The first thing was that actually there was a lot of CTA member products, yeah. But the lab who conducted the tests, I won't say who they are. They have changed hands now, and I know who owns them. But the lab that was actually conducting the test had no backup lab for comparison, and there was no backup labs for the two labs that should have been using as a comparison to ensure that both of them were actually calibrated appropriately. And let's talk about lead questions. Now, I draw on a poll quite a lot, right, from Statista, and it's all about cannabis and recreational drug use. But it's for cannabis, sorry, not recreational, soft drug use. But I believe it's more for cannabis, but labeled that to confuse the issue, because the lead question is actually, what do you think about soft drugs like cannabis? And it's like, okay, so that's the first thing you're putting in people's heads. That, to me, is like cannabis. Like, it's about cannabis. So with the CMC poll, right, do you know, I think this is the exact wording for question one. Do you know that CBD is derived from the marijuana plant? And it's like, hold on. In fact, rewind my selector, 2004. Like, marijuana plant. Is marijuana plant the same definition as skunk? Or is it just when it's got over 0.2% THC in? That's something worth checking. But, certainly it's...
Marijuana, it doesn't have a defined connotation under any act or statute that I have ever found in the UK. But it obviously carries over a certain connotation of a certain class. Whenever you hear somebody saying that, whether they recognize it or not, they are deliberately trying to create a separation and put in a classist inflection in what they are saying. And as you say, like putting even just going, oh, soft drugs like cannabis, and saying, instead of going, how do you feel about cannabis? Because then that person's going to go, well, actually, I think cannabis is amazing, should do all this, but oh, so soft drugs, what are other soft drugs? Mushrooms, I've never tried them, I'm scared of them, so, this is, what if that's and they get lost in all of the other mire instead of actually, as you say, there was a poll not recent in the fucking mainstream politics zeitgeist that was in the Telegraph or something, and no one knows who the fuck paid for it. And it was so cherry-picked, and the questions were so meandered that it was done so that the right-wing press could post a headline basically going, like Tory revolt or whatever it fucking was. They're like, oh, no, it wasn't. It was to show that there was more support for any other Tory leader than Keir Starmer. So if Rishi was to be replaced, his replacement would win the next election, and it was through gerrymandering fucking questioning, and it's the same mechanism, and it's done purely to start that conversation, so then people on social media share the headline rather than looking at the story and being analytical and thinking, well, how does this fit with all the other information I know?
Do you do those YouGov polls that come through on Google?
Yeah,
I would suggest just having him come through, because it gives you an interesting picture of what's happening or what the main thoughts are in those who are in the political landscape, right? Because, I mean, it does. There are polls that will come up and you'll feel like, well, you're giving me free answers there, but actually none of them actually reflect what I feel my answer should be. They are guided, certainly. And you can see really that.
Oh, dude, this is a resource for podcasting. It's just there's loads of articles and be like, oh, so the majority of Brits think this. I can be like, oh, we talk about this. Oh, we got this. We're talking about this.
I tell you what, as well, when you go through it, right, you can sometimes come up with a question where you're allowed to leave your opinion, right?
Oh, I've got a few of them.
Yeah, but then I noticed. But straight after that, you then have the option to grade other people's opinions and look through what the general state of play is, and sometimes those people who don't have a chance to answer a question in the way that they want to answer it, they do get vocal. And of course, if it's topics like the Horizon scandal with the post office, I mean, that is disgusting, and certainly you will see people voice their opinions on that one.
What the fuck is it? Sorry. I'm looking at the website. I've just typed in cannabis. I was looking at the first one going, this is interesting. Like someone's put a poll basically together of like, would you likely to try cannabis if infused in a drink and legally available? And like the majority of people, 46%, not at all. Cumulatively between like not very, somewhat likely, and not very likely, very likely is 46. And then the rest don't know. But then on the page, when you land on it, there is this thing here. I'm going to share it just to show people to actually laugh at the state of this question. Where's my share screen? It's that one. Come here. That one. Share. Do we share? Yeah, this here. How addictive is cannabis? And you see 2 bars and you go, oh, I bet one bar is addictive and the other is not addictive. And then you read what they are. Fairly addictive or very addictive.
Yeah.
How fucking loaded. Oh, wait, here we go. Oh, thank fuck for that. Yeah, we clicked on it and there are other options. I thought that was literally a data set of just that, but that's interesting. Look at
wow.
That many people think that it's addictive.
Okay, so most people not addictive at all. Fairly addictive.
Fairly addictive. Very addictive is on the rise this year.
Oh, not the addictive of all is on the bottom. Now, why would that be? Now, let's have a little look at what's going on around the world. We're getting mentions of tainted weed, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some serious issues. I mean, they've kind of debunked. Actually, shout out to Weed World. I can't remember which one of the reporters, but there is in the latest issue of Weed World, somebody is debunking the fentanyl cannabis-laced myth over in the States. There was something in the UK that concerned me quite recently, and given, I guess, our contentious interpersonal history, maybe, I'm a bit reticent to mention, but there was a video put out by the UK CSC a few days ago where founder Greg DeHoe, I don't know if it was his voiceover, I don't know if it was his fingers, but somebody was thumbing a bud and there was grit bits sort of coming off and they were talking about it. And the last sentence of it was, this has already caused a seizure and the woman who had a seizure, is allergic to opioids.
That's
and then the video cuts off and it just, even then it's just taking my breath away again there. And to think of like, I'm not given everything that's fucking happened, I'm not accusing Greg of propaganda or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I think it's a very careless phrasing. It feels very loaded. And we have some contaminated batch issues across the country. That is a true thing. I literally went into 2 hydro shops 2 days ago now, one of which has been a long-term supporter of sort of Durham's work, like the club events and everything else, someone that I have a very good working and personal relationship with. And he was reiterating this sort of narrative that we're seeing in the UK, that the Albanians are leaving in droves. The Albanian minister, I can't remember which ministry it is.
Hold on, does that mean that means there's going to be a nationwide shortage of Stardog?
Drought is already happening in some places. There's quite a few lads that I'd heard from other people that I speak to down south that said they were up here. When I've spoken to, like I said, easily the largest hydro distributor in the northeast, it's like, nah man, they're further up. So some of the lads are heading up to Scotland, and Scotland's always had like a glut problem because there's only two really tiny roadways in and out of Scotland on the east and west coast. But if there's then production sort of moving there, it would make sense. Rents are becoming a massive problem, so people are trying to get further and further. The Albanian big growers, are trying to get further and further away. But one of the ministers. They're potentially offering like I think it was up to €1 million. They were saying that you can bring up to €1 million into the country. We're not going to ask questions. However you made your money over there, if you want to come back to Albania now, you can have this money and we're not going to investigate you. Bear in mind, about 6 months ago, Albania quietly announced their intention to, so many legal air quotes, legalize medical.
Is that only for nationals? I mean, could you want to move down here? We'll set up a grow, see how it goes. We'll talk to Alison Hernandez. We'll get it eased. Like, and then basically just like, emigrate over there. Million euros, ask no questions. Why have I got a Welsh Janner accent? I didn't know this was only a national thing.
It's basically that they're suffering the same issue that the majority of countries are suffering now, is like a sex crisis, a collapse in birth rates, and Albania is only 2.2 million, if that strong. And Albania nationals are statistically disproportionately involved in drug trade in mainland Europe, at least, if not in other areas. I mean, there are various stories. Vice have done some good coverage historically of sort of how the Albanians are cutting out or circumnavigating some of the traditional cartel routes and are actually shipping shit straight into Europe, into Albania, and through Baltic regions and up and distributing. Obviously, they've been highly involved in cocaine for quite a long time. But to kind of bring that back to our earlier point before, a lot of the product that we were seeing there wasn't tainted with pharmaceuticals. It wasn't anything kind of done to it, as far as that I could see. It was just grown with things that you wouldn't want ideally your fucking flower to be grown with elements and things that are designed and produced for ornamental flower production. Not for foods, not for consumption. These are not combustibles. These are not consumables. And even if they are consumable graded, that's for the stomach acid in your belly, which can dissolve steel. So remember that it's not for volatilization when you set the fucker on fire. The speculation does seem to be that these tainted products, there is some sort of salt, that it is a great sort of sodium. It's something in terms of the way that it is behaving. We've seen historically sugar, glass, sand. Obviously, sugar breaks down, caramelizes. You can see that. You can understand that quite easily. The glass, quite often, depending on your roach size and kind of how you smoke, you feel it through when you pull. You can get quite a sharpness, and it can tear and actually be quite an unpleasant experience. I mean, we saw fiberglass tainted cannabis in Durham about 10 years ago, and that was just from an enormous grow that was dried in like an attic space, exposed to all the fiberglass, and a fan just blowing it onto the fucking weed. But there does seem to be something, I can't tell the scale of it, but it does seem to be popping up in Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, across the UK. And like I said, if it then seems to be this narrative that a lot of Albanian nationals are leaving, they dominated the market for so many years that a lot of the hobbyists and the kind of local nationals back down because they wanted a higher return. Whereas the Albanian guys were often, allegedly trafficking people, younger people, and they were exploiting labor. They weren't paying rents on certain facilities. They weren't paying electricity, etc. So the margins could be a lot lower. And obviously they turned up in various marketplaces and were dropping boxes hundreds upon hundreds of pounds cheaper. And the larger producers couldn't keep up. So it is evolving quite quickly down on the ground level, but it does seem that we are going to end up with a point of a drought. So if anybody is thinking about it, now is probably a time to chuck a tent together and get yourself sorted, because prices are going to go fucking silly. Cannabis has already booked the trend against inflation for quite a few years, but with everything else going up, nutrients are going to go up again this April with price costings, which will add something to it. Electricity, that's going to get very unstable potentially, given what I'm reading here, which says most Brits, I'm tying it back in, this is genius. Most Brits think that World War III is likely in the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, let's talk about that for a second. I know this isn't really kind of, shall we say, on topic, but there's something I noticed at the, shall we say, the jib jab time, right? And well, it was two things actually. There's a site, I think it's Diageo or something like that, and it carries through forecasts of economic growth, GDP, population, and it covers other areas like military expenditure, size, and whatnot. For some reason, it said that we were going to be receiving a population crash by next year. And actually, the UK will go from 67 odd million that it is now down to 15 million. Now, that's quite interesting. And another thing that I noticed, and that's allegedly a reputable site. I'll have to find the link for that. I did share it with Guy Coxell. But yeah, it's a site that's used by politicians, and that kind of got me. But what I also noticed is that on Facebook, I started getting these sites come onto my timeline about fighter jets and historic Navy boats and modern Navy boats and the likes of. And I'm like, well, I am a forces kid, but I don't think I've given any kind of indicator to Facebook algorithms or anything like that would suggest that all of a sudden I want to be seeing typhoons and lightnings and ME-262s and, like Apache gunship kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong. Forces kids, my dad is actually a retired Apache gunship technician. And I do have a little bit more than a passing interest, but not to the point that I go out of my way of, talk about my dad's future or plans of what I'd do if a war would occur, or it just came about strangely. And then of course you got the Ukraine issue, shall we say, which seems over, Ukraine wanting to join NATO. I mean, why? Considering what's going on with our own countries, what's so attractive? Did they need to be a member of NATO? Still have, they don't have to become part of Russia and become part of Europe. They could just turn around and say, do you know what? We'll hold fire for 5-10 years, see how the land lies. I don't know. Could it be that simple? But then, of course, other conflicts. Houthi rebels from Yemen. Oh, let's send a couple of aircraft carriers down there. Like, they're going to be able to combat that. But then that's the thing. The Ukraine versus Russia, the amount of resources they got. I know the other governments are providing up-to-date weaponry and the likes of, but you'd think the firepower versus the resource. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of this is scripted. And forgive me, I am a Christian, and it does say in the Bible that there will be wars and rumors of wars. And sometimes you look at the state of the world and you think, why? But equally, you can look at it sometimes and you can think, well, hold on. There's agendas behind closed door with cannabis. There's agendas with everything. Is some big agenda coming out here? And this is where it comes down to some really, really interesting stuff. Now, I can't remember the name of this guy. He's around in the 1800s, and he actually described all three world wars, right? He described the intent and direction of the First World War before it happened. And of course, the Second World War. No. We're talking someone in the 1860s or something like that. He's tied in with, shall we say, some lodgy kind of stuff, right? But he describes the intent that's behind the First World War, right? If you don't find it, I'll find it, and we could put a link to it below because it's publicly accessible information. But certainly, like I said, describes the intent of the First World War, describes the intent and direction of the Second World War, and then it describes the intent that will come as a result of the Third World War. And I hate to say it, that intent has already had indications. It's one religion versus another. And actually, that's rather worrying. That one guy could predict the First, Second, and Third World War. Well, he didn't predict. He actually gave a plan for it. And actually, those plans would then go through fruition and then become First, Second, and Third World War. If Kirsty was here, she'd go, it's
So it's Albert Pike, and it's Albert Pike's letter is the thing of contention. U.S. soldier from 1871. I'm not going to show. Daily Mail was the first thing that came up, and I always feel ashamed having to look at a Daily Mail article.
Breaking out lives.
But yeah, there is some contention about whether it is a fake letter. But yeah, basically the predictions say that the First World War would begin in 1914 and would be triggered by mysterious Illuminati hoping to bring down the Russians' reign of czars. The Second World War, come to fruition in 1939, would be fermented many years later by a clash between fascists and Zionists, which is pretty fucking spot on. Predictions are said to have been penned by Confederate officer and Freemason. Mm-hmm. Some people, I think it's going to require a bit of a deep dive to see whether it's sort of fake or not, but it is interesting. There's a party that says that the Third World War will be between Islamic leaders and the West. And I mean, I personally would lean towards more it being fake than anything else. I think history is too chaotic and manic to form in such a way. I think again, could entirely be wrong, but to what you said of before, without besmirching the good name of your faith, sir, fundamentalists of all three of the Abrahamic beliefs have an interpretation of their holy books that speak of an apocalypse. All of the apocalypses involve each other, all of them involve the Holy Land, and all of them are going to require great effort and resource to execute. And yeah, if you, without getting too conspiratorial or whatever else, obviously this is all sort of factual. If you look at the Balfour Declaration, the agreement and the conversations that were happening in the British Parliament for, 40 years prior to its signing, before the First World War. I mean, if you look into the 1800s, we were some of the most ardent anti-Semites in the fucking world, in the Brits. You look at the history of the royal family and everything else and how we describe them. You can get news clippings online. We are the first to call them inhuman. We are the first to, really denigrate and to remove humanity of the Jews. And then from this, we kind of export it out into Europe. But there does seem to be this confluence, it's like opening a door and they're all there. And it's like, oh, the Zionists, oh, the Masons, oh, these neoliberal capitalists, oh, these people, oh, this, oh, that. And you're like, the fuck is going on here, lads? Do you know what I mean? And it does literally feel like, if you listen to someone like fucking Benjamin Netanyahu and you look at his kind of politics and whatever else, if you think of that they are trying to bring about the end of days, everything makes sense. It all makes sense to me. And cannabis, I believe, is just another industry that is captured to power that machine. It needs money, it needs resources, and it needs to be kept from the people. Because if everyone's running around in the Holy Land getting high as shit and going, why are we killing each other? What's this crack? What did my granddad's granddad do to you? I mean, that's from one side, but on the other, it's literally, no, you've killed their fucking parents, you've blown up their fucking kids, you've taken their legs. Like, it's entirely disproportional without getting into a huge rant on that. But the mechanism still feels the same, that there are individuals that are indoctrinated into this. And again, just look at Scientology. Look at what they actually believe, and yet they still do. I don't think it's too hard to then extrapolate from that an interpretation of these major faiths and religions, and the reason that the Vatican holds so much knowledge and wealth and is connected with so many private companies and capitalist markets around the world it's not coincidental. It feels, like I said, the war's going to need funding, and it's got to be the best war. We've had these shitty, world wars. This is God's war, son. This is going to be the best thing you've ever seen. And that's what I think everything is, with provoking China, with fucking Iran and the Houthis, with the fucking, all of the misdirections, all of this bullshit it feels scripted because it's formulaic. They've designed the only things are allowed to happen in this kind of story. It's like they took Joseph Campbell, hero of the journey of the hero, and the kind of archetypal story that we're all extrapolating in that kind of Gilgameshian kind of way through modern cinema, and we look at it and going, everything's the same. It's because there's archetypal stories, as Carl Jung kind of spoke of. They've taken that and gone, now everything is a film. And this is why you got people then saying, like, this psyop with fucking, what's that lassie singer? Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And people talk about, there's going to be a proposal, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. I fell down a rabbit hole about 6 hours the other day with that. It's mental.
You need to go back to YouTube, right? Because it's been noticed that occasionally plant stories reach the press in the US, shall we call them the fourth estate. And certainly if people want to know what the press is, check out Fourth Estate. You kind of get a little bit more of a picture. So yeah, basically there's this channel that basically has been overlapping the identical content that all of these American news broadcasters have used, and it's insane. Taylor Swift is not a psyop. Believing so is a danger to our democratic way of life. Oh, is that hilarious?
It's because she is and she isn't. It's not that she's special compared to the rest of them. They all are. If it is allowed to proliferate, it is because they are captured and controlled. You are a safe voice. You're not suddenly going to go and criticize or say one of the things. You know, you are going to be fucking pro-Israel. You are pro-capital. You are anti-communist. You are anti-socialist. Do you know what I mean? You are free market economist. You are the Thatcherite fucking spirit manifest. Then yeah, boom, you get everything you want. Look at acting, look at journalism, look at any of these major professions in which their actions help perpetuate the kind of the roles that we play in society. They're all from upper middle and higher classes. And so that they don't have to be inculcated into this belief system. They were born with it. You are bad people because you don't have money.
Do you know who's not safe? Taylor Swift's new chap. I mean, let's look at the history. How many albums has she got? And how many of those albums have not been written as a result or have been written not as a result of a breakup? I mean, you know, she's yeah. You know, if I was single, no, I'd be like, sorry, I've listened to your albums and yeah, no.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, to be fair, I've listened to the albums, and anyway.
But again, these controlled narratives. So this is why, to sort of loop back to the GW thing, as we were saying before, that you were just a conspiracy theorist. We all were. Anyone that believed in this, that looked at this, that thought anything of it. But again, go back to the origin of the term. Conspiracy theorist was a term created and popularized by the CIA in the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination, which, if you look at, you know, not too recent government documents from the States, they're all but admitting that that's what they fucking do.
The thing is, though, it's easy to call someone that when you find one point of interest and then you start seeing loose connections left, right, and center, and you don't quite get the picture right? Okay. People will be called a conspiracy theorist on that, but it always comes down to that one grain of truth. Every myth has a starting point, and that normally is a grain of truth. And it's just having the time and having the patience and understanding to expand beyond that point and see what else connects with it and verify that evidence and kind of understand what those implications are. And like I said at the beginning, right, you know, a lot of what I've been able to research is because a lot of people in the industry know stuff already. You know, you knew stuff, I knew stuff. It wasn't until I started listening that then I started exploring and determining whether what I was hearing had any grains of truth. And as it goes, a lot of it does. There is still a few bits and pieces inside of the cannabis world that do seem vague. You know, there is a level of speculation, but then, of course, speculation is there based on the evidence that already exists. So it might not be wrong at all, but it might be not right, but very close to the mark. And the thing is, when you're close to the mark, I think that's where people need to stop removing the conspiracy theorist tag, because there's obviously something there. It's provable that something is there. It's like when my opinion that there is a public-private partnership between GW Pharmaceuticals and the British government. Well, so I can see the formulation of it. I can see how it's been managed over time, and I can see who has managed it. But what I can't see is a piece of paper that says there is a public-private partnership at play between these parties, But then that's very hard to kind of dismiss. There's with the surrounding evidence that's available. GW got their license to grow in a spot important down technically before they even existed. How does that actually show that there isn't a public-private partnership? And in fact, if you think about other government agreements, would any of them potentially land you a spot in Porton Down? I'm not too certain.
Well, you've got to think of, as you said, the level of scrutiny, security, and clearance that one would need to visit said facility, let alone to be able to establish something so controversial. It's like you said, it's conspiracy fact, not theory. There is a conspiracy. That isn't the element that is wrong in that sentence. It's the idea that you being a theorist, that you're as if you're going, oh, well, Bigfoot is an alien and, he came here to flat Earth from, I don't know, the 12th dimension or something. I just made that last one up, I'm guessing, but there probably is a community of 12th dimensioners out there. Big up.
Let's start the community of 13th dimensioners then.
Yeah, we're one ahead of you guys. We're just one better. Join our club, not theirs. It's a fabricated reality, to borrow the Noam Chomsky sort of phrase. It's manufactured consent, and they have manufactured our consent around cannabis for a long time. And it's not even consent; it's they've manufactured our dissent, and we are fucking angry about this. We are frustrated because, as again, I was talking to with Craig last week. We were talking before we started recording about the different people that we know in Canada and over the scene, and who's died and what has happened to them while they fought for their freedom, for their health, for their right to life. And then what these giant conglomerates have done and how much fucking money they've made and how rich these CEOs have become, while thousands, millions have suffered, or at least not benefited from the potential of the plant, from a ubiquitous education, from a wider point of access, so that people can choose to slowly, personally cultivate their own relationship with this plant. Because frankly, I am not, and I've told this to my doctor, and we kind of we're back and forth about it. I'm not going to respect you until you know more than me. If I come in and you're a cannabis doctor and I can school you 15 times a second, I'm not going to listen to you. And especially I'm not going to listen to you, this is a bit personal, if the product that you then suggest to me is possibly the worst that I have seen since I've been involved in this. Like something is wrong and broken in that system, or from my side of it, because it doesn't serve my needs. But then it's not broken for the needs of the people that it is serving. It is, as I say, it's creating a thing of, it's the same with, no offense to CanCard either, it's creating a two-tiered system. There's those that know and were smart enough and paid and you're part of the club, and those that didn't. Yeah. And while there is always a form of, to borrow quite a contentious term right now, apartheid, I'm going to be sat here being a dick. I'm always going to be sat here being a dick, but I'm going to be actively being a dick in the world and calling this shit out everywhere I can and being a pain in the arse to people until they see it as clearly as I see it, that there should be no separation. If you've accepted now this plant can be medicine, fuck off out my life. Never accost us ever again. You smell it, you run the fuck away. You stay away from us till we come to you in a year, 18 months, 2 years, and goes, oh, we as a community have decided this is what we want. Regulated, bitch. There are employees. They're supposed to serve our communities. Yet for 30 years, allegedly, for YouTube in my own legal defense, these cunts have been conspiring to criminalize, to vilify, to gaslight, manipulate, and call us paranoid, druggies, and to say that we're fucking mental. It's incomprehensible. It's injustice incarnate. And I think the work that you're doing in this space, as I've said to you before, off the record and on the record, I'm worried they're going to whack you, son. I genuinely think that you're unpinning something so fucking large, because GW isn't just, oh, it's got a jazz number. As you said, look at what's happening in the States. Open agreements of governmental contracts with various East Coast states. Provable fact that's out there and evidenced. That isn't just a behavior they come to. They've perfected that somewhere. They've learned how to manipulate these governments. And like I said before about Florida suddenly going, oh, we don't like smokables and we want to reduce this, and all this over restriction and bureaucracy only seeks to benefit GW Jazz, whatever they're trading at as these days, and their global dominance with their hundreds of patents that they were able to build and acquire in their little lab coats, and no, off the backs of my friends going to prison, our friends dying.
And some of which might have been using cannabis for conditions that GW now have patents for, that they may have even had the cannabis to analyze from your friends that ultimately gave them that patent. That is all wrong. As for popping off, mate, I mean, I miss the days when it used to be all sorted out with a battle rap. I mean, really, get me Theresa May, Victoria Akins, Walter Grave, Gordon Brown on a stage. Come on, 16 bars each. Let's see how we fare. Although I've got to be honest, Gordon Brown looks like he might be able to throw a mean 16 bars. I don't know. And as for that level of control, it's exactly how it is, mate. I can tell you how it's happening. It's the same in the UK. You get academics on panels who provide opinion that allows for the formulation of policy. It'll probably be the same in the US. You've got Georgia State and New York City State both have observable public-private partnerships with GW Pharmaceuticals, as well as really technically the FDA, because they gave Epidiolex orphan drug designation in 2014, which is actually some level of public-private partnership. And the FDA had to sign off the ones with Georgia State and New York City as well. So there is a big thing there. Are they going to start using academics from universities in New York State and Georgia and wherever other places they've got? Quite possibly, because let's be honest, GW has pretty much worked with 90% of the universities in the world. Is absolutely insane. That does put them in a little bit of a compromising position, though. Certainly when you have the likes of the COT, the ACNFP, the ACMD, you see who has some kind of direct or indirect kind of tie to it. Are we going to see the same in the US when the FDA draw upon academics for opinions on how they move forward with bits and pieces? Possibly. I don't know how it works over there, but it seems a little bit... I don't know. They almost seem a little bit more careful over there, whereas what I'm finding over here, because it's been a long plan, there's a level of sloppiness that wouldn't have been called sloppy, shall we say, back in the day, because, some of this started before people had access to the internet, computers, the likes of...
100%. They never expected half of this to be traceable, like you said. And the comfortability they have here is they represent... Like I said, the MPs are captured themselves. So there's no MPs just going to stumble like a working class, I'm actually here to help the people MP is going to stumble across this and go, we've got to help this. They don't have to worry about that. They're all on board with it intrinsically. Good for Britain, it's rebuilding the empire. Because that's what it fucking feels like. It feels like they're reliving in that fucking, what's his name, Jacob Rees-Mogg kind of fucking, like he's having a wank fantasy of, we'll rebuild the empire. Because that's what it fucking was. We conquered the fucking world with cannabis as a resource. Granted, most of it was fucking Russian and Latvian, but still, it feels like they're trying to use cannabis to rebuild this empire of finance, if not by actual land and dominion. And the GW are out in every pocket. So everywhere you look, that they're going, we're going to do medical and industrial. GW's fingerprints are all the fuck over it. Look at every market that came on board with medical across Europe, across the Mediterranean region. What was the first product of every single market? Sativex, every single market. Wait, there may be one or two exceptions that I can't pull out my ass right now, but the vast majority of them. And she goes, how did your product suddenly land here so fast? And yeah, you have approval here and there, but saying, who was the boards and the body that fought for this? And that's what it feels like is happening right now, is GW are racing, most likely against the Chinese more than anybody else, because they don't respect international patents, to produce the drug that, I take this once a week and the epilepsy's gone. I take this and that's gone. I take obviously maybe not that once. Obviously they want 4 times a day fucking maintenance drugs, many costings. But the idea of you being the drug that works. So then cannabis disappears and you're the company that made the cannabis, in the same way opium disappeared, but it was replaced by heroin. Do you know what I mean? It went from being all of the different cultivars and subcultivars and genus of opiate that you could use, and the variant grown in different ways and extracted in different ways, to then just, no, it's heroin. It's one formulation, one extraction, one thing. And it feels like that's what they're trying to do is push all the cannabis down into this is for coughs, this is for sneezes, this is for shits, this is for sleeping, this is for. Did you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap this up
No worries. Yeah, I wasn't over
about
time now.
now. But do you know what? I had something in my head there. Yeah, you know when the return happens and you're finally on Hemp Hound TV.
Hmm.
You know, there's a no swearing policy.
I can censor myself,
I,
kinda.
yeah, kind of. I'll be the one doing the editing.
I'll write when I know I'm going to swear. I'll write down the time and I'll hold up the time saying edit this time. I can do it. I can do it. So I've been quite animated today. Yeah, there's a few things that have annoyed me, but it's been cathartic. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I think we covered some good subject matter, and are people allowed? I definitely, if with your blessing, would like to include your LinkedIn details below for people to follow, because I think that's where you're most active and putting out the most material. And I know quite a lot of it is esoteric, but the right listeners, and I know there's a lot of you out there, you guys will find this interesting, and you may have something to help add to the picture and to the conversation. So
Absolutely. And if you do have something to add, I will be all ears, especially as I just had a haircut and I can see him now. But yeah, definitely. Anything to add, no matter how small you think it is, it could be bigger than you think.
excellent, excellent. I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. I will let you jump off, brother. I'll do some housekeeping, and I guess we'll have you back on for your fifth time. Probably like April, I guess, at the rate you're working. By the time I'm back from Spannabis and settled, you'll have taken half the world down. So we'll catch up again. Yeah, very soon, brother.
Awesome. Look forward to it, sir.
All right, take it easy, man.
Bye.
Well, there you go, folks. That was Cefyn Jones from Hemp Hound. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Simpa Life Podcast. Yeah, I thought we covered some wicked subject matter. I'll include links below to all of Cefyn's work, like I said, as well, especially the LinkedIn link below. Check that out. That is where you can keep most up to date, or rather up to date with the most up to date work that he's producing, the investigations that he is conducting, and kind of the narrative that he's kind of unpicking at the minute. This truth that he's seeking to find in this. Yeah, this dark abyss of obfuscation, corruption, cronyism. The politics of this country have conspired to allow to happen, while you and I remain ultimately criminalized and vilified for our choice to engage with cannabis, our choice to engage with other drugs. Yeah, it's a farce, really, I think is the best way to describe it. All right, I'm not going to keep you much longer, guys. I want to thank you very much for sticking to the end and for supporting the podcast as always. If you enjoyed it, please do give us a like, share, subscribe, a rating, stars, thumbs up, whatever it is that you do on your platform to show appreciation. I greatly appreciate you for doing it. Check us out on all social media platforms at The Simpa Life. You can check out thesimpalife.com for more exclusive articles, blogs, etc. And yeah, you can check us out on patreon.com/The Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can help me keep the little lights on this little project of mine. All right, it's been a pleasure, folks. Be wonderful to each other. Like I said, I know I keep hitting this, but we only get it every 4 years. Plan today, do something good for fucking the leap year on the 29th. It's a day you wouldn't otherwise have this year. Take it for yourself, take it with loved ones, and do something fucking wonderful. And it doesn't have to be something grandiose, and don't fucking do it for social media. Do it for you. Go and sincerely live, man, at least for one day this year, the 29th. That is the fucking day. So yeah, check us out on all social media platforms at The Simpa Life. Check out thesimpalife.com for exclusive articles, blogs, and more details. Yeah, check us out on patreon.com/The Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. All right, folks, you've been beautiful. You've been wonderful. I look forward to next week with, I don't know, somebody. It'll be awesome. It'll be great. We'll love it. All right, take it easy, folks. I'll see you next week. Well, Jesus. I didn't realize quite how yeah got in here. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. He says adding more smoke to the fucking roof. Oh, I don't call this the hot box studio for nothing.